Let's hear now from one of these so-called anti-racist educators who is troubled by her own 4-year-old liking white Disney princesses. She sees that as a failing. But then she will also saw an issue with your 3-year-old daughter wanting to dress up like a Polynesian princess.
My daughter's 4 years old. I am an anti-racist educator, quote unquote. She's still watching Disney movies and she is choosing a white princess over princesses of color.
Have you talked to her about that?
All the time.
My 3-year-old daughter is her favorite princess is Moana.
Love it.
It's a good sign.
Yeah.
But then I also thought, you know, there's a little bit of cultural appropriation here. She wants to be Moana for Halloween. Mm-hmm. So how do we navigate that? Do I go and buy the Pacific Islander native attire for my white 3-year-old?
I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
Matt, were you shocked to learn that your 3-year-old daughter is inherently racist?
I was very troubled, and I got to tell you, it's even worse than it sounds in that clip, because earlier in the same conversation, I talked to her about I have 6-month-old twins. They were 6 months old at the time when we were filming it, and I said, when do I need to start talking to the babies about their racism? And she told me that you need to start talking to them now, like before they can talk. And the thing is, wow. you listen to these ideas. And it sounds crazy. It is crazy. We laugh at it, and we should laugh at it because it's totally absurd. But it's also, it's also quite dangerous. And especially when you consider that, maybe to you and me, we hear a 3-year-old is racist for liking Moana, and we kind of recognize it as inherently absurd. But there are a lot of people who don't recognize it as absurd, and they fall into this, and they're brainwashed by it. And that's another thing that we try to bring out in the film.
Oh, absolutely. And you see that right now with Halloween a couple of days away, the way people are twisting themselves into knots trying to figure out what's offensive and being offended on behalf of others often. Now, tell me about working as a waiter undercover at a dinner hosted by two of the worst grifters in this space, Regina Jackson and Sayara Rayo. They charge silly white women enormous amounts of money to basically abuse them over a meal.
It was a miserable experience. And really, the hatred of yourselves and each other is like the not seeing your power, the being afraid. Like, all you do is talk about each other, talk about yourself. Oh my God, I'm so fat.
That's all they do. I'm telling you, these white women.
But that's it. I'm so fat, I'm so stupid, I'm blah, blah, blah.
Sorry.
Your kids are watching you.
The self-loathing among white, liberal, affluent women. Tell me about this, because it's a phenomenon that's evident here in Australia. I believe it's evident in parts of Europe and certainly in America, where they are leaning overwhelmingly left, and they seem to have some very strange ideas about things they should feel great guilt over, even if they've committed no sin.
Yeah, it's an epidemic, and right now in America we have our first DEI presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, who's sort of trying to ride this kind of confusion and guilt into the White House, and we'll see if it works or if it doesn't. But I mean, the fact is that what you saw in the clip there, called "Race to Dinner," it's a real thing. Everything in the movie is real, and there's a reason why grifters like Sayara Rao are able to make a living, a pretty good living. I mean, these women, these white women, pay thousands of dollars to sit around a dinner table for 2 hours and have these other two women call them racist. And I was in the room, as you could see. I had to come as a waiter because I wasn't invited to the table because I'm not a woman. But I saw this kind of brainwashing session firsthand, and it's brutal. I mean, it's ruthless. These women were getting torn down. And just eviscerated, torn apart, and convinced that they were racist. Meanwhile, I'm listening to it, and the women at the table, they obviously have lots of issues that they need to work through, but none of them are racist. They don't have to worry about being racist. They're definitely not racist. but they're convinced that they are, and then they kind of are told that they have to go to these DEI grifters, who are sort of the high priestesses of the DEI cult, for absolution. You know, it becomes this almost religious-like cult.
Now, the highlight of the film for many viewers was your masterful dismantling of the queen of critical race theory, DEI queen herself, Robin DiAngelo, the author of White Fragility. And you managed to get her to pay reparations to your black producer. What do you say to those who say you engaged in dishonest methods to expose someone like DiAngelo? You embarrassed her. Are you guilty of punching down, Matt?
No, I don't think so at all. Listen, you know, this movie has drawn comparisons to Borat, and I think that, I mean, there are some comparisons there, and I'm flattered by the comparisons because Borat's a hilarious film. But in movies like that, and in other occasions where Hollywood films have taken a similar approach, oftentimes they really do punch down. I mean, they are embarrassing normal Americans who are just living their lives. In our case, we are looking to expose people who are, you know, make thousands of dollars off this, or millions. They sell books. They have PhDs. They consult with Fortune 500 companies, and those are the people we're looking to expose. And the thing is, you know, it's really, there were no dishonest methods, because the only method really was, and you'll see it if you watch the whole movie and you watch that whole scene, the only method is just me giving her the opportunity to live according to her own principles. And we didn't force her to do anything. She does ultimately pay reparations, spoiler alert, but we didn't force her to do it. She could have just said no and refused, and that would have been it. And then she would not have embarrassed herself. She wouldn't be embarrassed in the scene. So if Robin DiAngelo walks away from that feeling embarrassed, and I think now she does, she has deleted all of her social media accounts and everything. She seems to be embarrassed. But she did that to herself. We didn't do that, I'm afraid to say.
And you're right, this isn't punching down in any sense of the word, because these are very powerful, influential people, not just becoming rich out of this DEI grift, you may call it, but just having enormous influence on the working lives of everyday people. DiAngelo, for example, does all sorts of training with top corporations, teaching them some of this philosophy, and then those employees are obliged to at least pretend to practice that in their working lives.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We ask her also in the film, you know, who has she worked with, and she starts listing off big corporations. And the interesting thing too in the film is that you could see her turn to off camera to one of our producers and say, well, should I say this out loud? She was actually she was unsure of whether she should reveal that detail or not. But the fact is that these people have a lot of power. They have, you know, when you've got HR companies at the biggest corporations in the world treating your ideology as gospel and forcing employees to affirm it, well, that's you know, when it comes to cultural power, it doesn't get more powerful than that, and that's exactly what we're trying to expose.
Now, I've got to ask you one question about the election. Race is becoming a big issue. The Democrats are determined to make it a big issue. Will it play a part in determining who is the next president of the United States?
I don't know. You know, it's hard for me to. Every time I've tried to make a political prediction, I've always been wrong. So I'm trying to show some restraint and not predict anything. I think that, you know, there are a lot of signs to me that are very positive for Trump right now. And even on the race issue, I think a lot of the polls are showing that the attempts by the Kamala campaign to gin up racial resentment and all of that has kind of backfired, and she seems to be losing support, especially among black men in particular. And that's not a surprise. And you know, but she's trying to use not just the racial grievances, but also the gender grievances. This is a whole campaign built on basically left-wing victimology, and she's going to try to ride it all the way into the White House. But there are a lot of, I think, very positive signs right now that the strategy is not working for her as well as she thought. But you know, we'll see in a few days.